this kind of intervention, which again was helpful in some ways, but it didn't take into account the individual differences that we needed to have taken into account. So this is a little presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the program. I'm going to talk about how we train the mentors. And then I picked 7 of our mentors this year, and I asked them the question, how does what you learn about developmental psychology and neuropsychology and genetics play a role in what you do every day on Wednesdays when you meet with your kids in the group, and on the weekends when you spend a couple of hours with your kids, or during the activities that we have the ropes course, and we have a wonderful project I'll describe later on about building dog houses. So the program has been going for about 10 years. It was founded really as part through the Women's Center, which had a program that mentored 7th grade girls. It was very popular, and they used college women to mentor 7th grade girls. So it became clear, especially when the Women's Center and the Women's Studies major began to look at concepts of men and masculinity as well as women and femininity, and that there might be a relationship between understanding violent behavior and subsequently gender violence by developing a program for boys. So again, the purpose was to be helpful in the community in the best way we possibly could, but also to hear back from the community to begin to craft some ideas of what might be effective, what is it that we want to continue to study as we were moving forward. So it was originally created by 2 people who had the idea to really kind of flip over what we were doing with the young women and the girls to do it with boys and college men. It started in 2009. Was started by 2 people who were really in the Women's Study department, and as the Women's Center grew and Women's Studies grew, it became more and more part of that program. So these were the commitments to understand not just what is effective in helping boys deal with issues of violence and violent behavior, but understanding a little bit about their sense of masculinity, where it came from, how they came to it, and what they needed to do with it in their everyday lives. So it involved hands-on things, talking to teachers, going to school with kids, but it also involved kind of larger concepts of how do people learn about masculinity, right? And when you put that and interface that on what's going on biologically with people, you have 2 parts of a puzzle that can really be powerful and synergistic when you look at them together. So what were the masculine behaviors we look like? Well, a lot of you probably work with 7th grade boys. Basically, their behavior is kind of a jailbreak. It's, it's all over the place. Some people are sort of hyperactive, some are hyper withdrawn, but all of them have some issues related to how they think they ought to be and how they think they ought to act. And in many cases, if you talk to 7th grade teachers, what you hear about is disruptive behaviors, difficult behaviors, behaviors that they don't know how to manage or control in a particular kind of way. So we wanted to not only intervene, but to listen coming back. So we thought, in order to do that, the main tool for this were the mentors, that we wanted them to be involved for a whole school year. Now again, unfortunately, because we're in an academic setting, we have mostly 9-month units to do this, although we have a number of mentors who do this for multiple years and work with kids over multiple years, at least to when they start in high school. But again, they're often college students, and they have other agendas besides just what they're doing with their mentees. But we're pretty clear in how we screen the kids that they're not just there to kind of build their CVs so they can get into law school. They actually want to be able to do these kinds of things, and there'll be some quotes in here from them as well. Right. Okay, we're introducing and fostering gender-aware perspectives and leadership development both in our mentors and in the boys themselves, that they don't realize what they're doing is representing masculinity, they're just being themselves. So part of, if you look at the literature about understanding things like media and media literacy, we know that it has a significant impact on the resiliency and the kind of inoculation effects that we can have with kids in being overly influenced to be hyper-masculine or, in some ways, to not be hyper-masculine. So we introduced this notion of gender awareness, and I'll tell you how we did that because we started really with the mentors. So we also wanted to counter the negative experiences and the violent developmental cultural messages that boys receive and move them more towards what were considered to be mainstream or more culturally acceptable. Now that's a whole can of worms that we don't have time to talk about, except to say we wanted to create some awareness and to encourage the development of respectful, healthy, pro-social, anti-violent behaviors. Again, part of that was through the modeling of the mentors, but part of it was also having the boys themselves understand the impact of their behavior on the people around them. Okay, and then, further, we wanted to develop leadership skills among the boys themselves so that they could begin to feel that in their lives they could actually make a difference. And part of that we do, many of you know, because you do this kind of work, is you get them to produce something. You give them projects to do. You do things where you ask them to be leaders in a particular way. And when you get to know the kids, you can actually target those interventions to individual kids. One of the ways that we frequently do that in mentoring programs is to have groups where you have a bunch of mentors and a bunch of kids all together. So the mentoring program that we had included one-on-one interactions on a weekly basis with the mentor and the mentee, but also a group activity, usually organized by schools. This year we were working with 2 middle schools. So we had a group in one middle school and a group in the other, and they met on a regular basis. And there was a curriculum-based, subject matter-based intervention that we did in the group. So we got a chance to both administer some content, but we also had a chance to look at the group dynamics and foster leadership among the boys. Right? So these are the things that the mentors say is really important, along with what the University of Virginia said, was that the goal was actually to provide engaged scholarship opportunities for students. One of the things that we always think about in the university and in training programs is what's the culture, the training culture that we have about what people want to do when they leave here. We always say in our program, we're not just training you to be a school psychologist or training you to be a clinical psychologist, we're training you to be a leader in your field. Because when you do that, you have a different kind of perspective of what you do. By the way, you'll be good at all that other stuff, and that's necessary. But we want you to have an eye on the bigger view, because as time goes on, we're going to need way more people enlisted into performing these programs than we're going to have people who come out of graduate programs. And so how do you train these people to be leaders in that? And we start with these college men. And sure enough, a lot of them wind up, some of them are self-selected, of course, but a lot of them wind up going on in human services in some way, starting mentorship programs. We've had, in the women's side, we've had 3 programs developed in Africa and South America that are pretty much clones of this program in other places around the world. Obviously, we want to support the young boys and the college students in their formative years, and so here's one of the things obviously we know about the brains of older adolescent boys that we would call college men, is that their brains are still forming too. So we're not just saying you need to treat this very malleable 7th grade boy, we're also teaching them something about themselves. In a minute we'll talk about how we do that. To support young boys and college students in becoming healthy adults, part of that is just, in the time they're with the mentors, they're at least doing healthy things. I don't know if you call pizza healthy, but they are doing activities that are outdoors and physically engaging. We also are very conscious about creating mentors and not just college guys who hang out with other kids. Right? Most universities that have athletic programs have mentoring programs where athletes go into the schools. Usually what they do is they kick the ball around or throw the ball around. And that's helpful, and we know that it's helpful, but there's so much more available in the brain power of the mentors that we're treating. We also this is especially for the mentors, want the college men to begin to contemplate and look at how they got their concepts of manhood and masculinity. Because for a lot of them, especially if you think about what the average sophomore in college, I'm in a large state university, what you think that person would look like, you have a stereotype of that. It's probably about 95% accurate. Right? That they're into having a lot of fun and they're into like sort of enjoying their college years so they can get out of college, but they always wish they could stay in college. Another thing is to actually teach some content about what we know about the cultural baggage or the cultural messages that we're getting about what boys are supposed to do, and to show that manhood is not a particular thing, and to hear what a lot of different people do. And again, that's part of what we do in the academic piece. So we don't just have mentors go out and give them money to take the kids to play miniature golf. We actually bring them back in and we train them to learn a little bit about how manhood is created. It's an outreach program to the community, so it's one of a number of programs that we do at the university, most universities do, to engage the local communities, and to try to do something that's replicable.
Do you do these in classes, or is it a one-on-one individual training with the mentors?
Very good question. We do it both, I'll say, but primarily in a group setting, which is a class. So they're required to take a 3-credit class in developmental psychology for this mentorship program in particular, and then.
So they even get credit for it.
So they even get credit for it, yes. So they get 3 credits in the fall and 1 credit in the spring. In the spring, where the curriculum is less set, we are actually coaching them individually as mentors, although we tend to do it in a group setting.
Yeah, it's very ambitious.
Yes, it's very ambitious, which is why it's still very small. Is we're trying to get all of the pieces down pat in a way that works. So these are some pictures with permission of various schools' years of mentors and mentees. That will explain now a little bit about what the program actually, what are the principles of the program. So we have a program and a curriculum that looks like this. So we actually have something that the mentors learn to present. So we spend a lot of time in kind of group activities with the mentors prior to the starting of school. We get them to bond. We sort of do activities with them. The same things we do with the mentees, we sort of do with them to get them to get a sense of camaraderie, because especially in the group setting, sometimes one of the mentors isn't there, and so we want the kids to be able to feel that they're not falling between the cracks. So this is mostly mentees with a few mentors mixed in. So the focus of what we were trying to teach in the program is a sense of authenticity for a lot of 7th grade boys who encounter older men or role models. There's a lot of facade that they have. There's a lot of activities that they've learned about how they think they're supposed to be. And it takes a while to penetrate that in a thoughtful way for them to be able to talk about the discrepancy between how they think they ought to be and how life really is for them. So that involves our mentors being involved with the parents or the foster parents, at least in an informal way. The second is respect. This is one of those characteristics that will help pretty much across the board. So it's easy to teach in vivo with 7th grade boys. If you put 7th grade boys in a room, you're going to have some disrespect like right away. It's a great opportunity to teach. So we have to teach our mentors how to manage that. We have to teach our mentors how to be competitive but respectful at the same time. And lastly, to use a competency model to foster the strengths that we learn about each of the individuals. Their strengths as a group in the projects they take on, but also their individual strengths that they experience. And there's nothing better to do that than have an older male with you who actually, instead of telling you what you should be doing and what you're doing wrong, help you see what you're already doing well and helping you focus that in a way that can really make a difference. So we have expectations for the big brothers. One is that they do this coursework that we refer to. These are just the 2 courses. The first is Fostering Leadership in Adolescent Boys, and the second is called Practice in Youth and Community Engagement. This is we do, I think a lot of people do ropes courses. We're fortunate to have one nearby. It's not the most fun thing that the kids do. I'll tell you about that one in a minute. Here's what the academic nut is, the piece that we try to throw out to them early on, and that's in this course. So in the course, we have a lot of readings and lectures in development from birth to adolescence, including a lot of research in neuropsychology, moral social development, attachment theory, to really ground these mentors in thinking about the world from a developmental perspective and looking in a different way than just, this is a kid, or he reminds me of my brother. Right? Then we spend a lot of time with the mentors in self-reflection. And the first is for them to reflect on their own development. And we say, like, what is a man to you? And where did you learn that? And so they actually, in the class, they come up in front of the class and they give a little presentation, sometimes a PowerPoint presentation, about what masculinity is for them and how they learned it and who they learned it from. And because our class varies, there are a lot of people who take this class who aren't mentors. It fortunately has a good reputation. But if you hear how 20 different men think about what being a man is and where they learned it, that's a very rich educational experience. And you learn, for one thing, that not everybody sees it the way you do. And not your little or your mentee's notion of masculinity is going to be the same as yours. And it may not be the same as their families, or it may be. We do extensive introspection in terms of journaling. I read a lot of journals about what's it like for the mentors when they confront the behaviors that they see in the kids, what sense are they actually making of them, and what developmental insights they have in themselves when they say, oh, I remember when I was in 7th grade, I remember what that was like. And then we ask them to write a lot about what do they see, what are they looking at. And then through that process of reporting what they see and discussions in class, they begin to put it together with what's going on developmentally. They're like, oh, that's an attachment-related issue. Okay, and if that was true, then these are the kinds of interventions that might work. And then in the second semester, we continue to meet with the mentors on a weekly basis, more on a one-on-one, kind of in a one-to-one focus, to say, what's happening right now? How's the group working? How's it breaking down? How's your individual time with kids working? And then it's the application of their own insights into what's going on with mentors, with the mentees, and we get to watch them. We get to see and supervise their behavior to make sure nobody's really off the rails. I mean, one of the things we do is background checks for kids, background checks for the mentors, and we then also want to monitor to make sure that all of the behaviors that are going on are positive. So in addition to the class, they are required to have a one-on-one contact plus a structured weekly after-school group every week. So once in a while they miss and they get covered for, but by and large, kids are pretty good at doing that. Once the whole group of them is doing it, they're very good about transportation, about walking kids to the activities. We have the university where we can bring kids and show them stuff and get them to meet really, really interesting people. And then some special activities, a ropes course, a field day, and then we also ask them to help recruit big brothers for the next year. We also expect them to interact with parents or with the guardians, and this is a very mixed bag of behaviors for a lot of them. For some of the kids, it's a brand new experience for the mentors to actually meet the families of these kids, and in many cases, we don't have the racial diversity in the mentors that we do in the mentees. So they're going into neighborhoods and meeting people. And then the parents also have wildly different agendas for what the mentorship program is, whether in fact it's sort of glorified babysitting, 1 day or 2 days that they don't have to be looking after their kids, which is not a bad reason, but probably not the best only reason. And for some of them, really getting the mentors to try to fill in what they as parents feel is lacking in their kids' life. Okay, so we expect them to do all of this thing. I won't dwell on all of the things we expect them to do. We expect them to come to class. We expect them to take exams. We expect them to actually learn the material that they learn. This is what one of the big brothers said about it. The most important thing he learned was so much learning to do. Learning does not just come from books. So that's why we do kind of community-based education is that a lot of learning doesn't come from books, probably the bulk of it. Right? This program joined because it was a really different kind of experience. That we have a Big Brothers and Big Sisters program through the university. It's not, it doesn't do nearly as much training, and it's not sort of as individual mentor focused. So this is our university gym. And so we bring the kids on the campus a fair amount because it's a safe place for them to be. It's usually green and well kept, and there's lots of fun stuff to do. And we also recruit lots of faculty or athletes or graduate students to share their lives, where we get to go into some laboratories, we get to go into sports facilities, all of which is very exciting for the kids. So we get them through this process not to just do the mentoring, but to become kind of enlightened mentors or educated mentors. Okay, some more quotes from Big Brothers about how they really integrate that kind of experience. Providing, combining university education, community service, and personal relationships. All right, what do we expect of the little brothers? That they come. This is the hardest thing, really. You think, and sometimes they don't come because they have a court appearance, or because they don't have any transportation, because their parents are working extra. Sometimes they can't come because they've had a conflict with other kids. Because remember, this is a school-based program, so the other mentees tend to be kids that you see during the day in school. Sometimes that's not going very well, and you may decide you're not going to come. That's a perfect thing for us to address and to take on, and to invite those kids to begin to learn to resolve those kinds of conflicts. We ask them to attend some special activities. Usually they enjoy that. UVA Day is one of those days where we go over to the university, some other special activities we have, and to do community service projects. I'll just describe this one project because I think it's my favorite of the projects we do. So we have a charitable organization in town that builds dog houses for dogs that are chained out in the yard. So they go through neighborhoods, and a lot of times these are neighborhoods where our kids are from, where there are just dogs on chains and no place for them to be. So they actually help prefabricate and cut the wood to build dog houses. So then we meet with them, and all of our mentors and mentees get together, and we spend a day building dog houses. So in a day we can build maybe 40 dog houses, 35. They're very pre-cut and ready. If you can use a drill and a hammer and not hurt yourself, you can build a couple dog houses in a day. And then you get to paint them, and it's kind of a sloppy, crazy thing. Then you get to drive around the neighborhood and decide who you want to give your dog house to. Right? So it's one of those things that's incredibly gratifying for everybody. It's sloppy and messy and fun and playful, and lots of paint fights. People don't throw tools, fortunately. But it's an example, and so we want to make sure the kids are available to do that so they can learn about their potency. Actually, there's nothing better than being able to produce something and then to give it away to somebody. And to apply what they learned at home and at school wherever they can. So it's very difficult sometimes because what the mentees learn during their time with the mentors is very different than what's going on in their homes. And sometimes they don't know how to speak about that at home, and they don't know how to speak about it with us. So we work hard in trying to foster that level of communication. And we provide transportation. This is probably, if you ever run a program like this, considering liability and stuff like this, this is like the biggest nightmare. You'd be like quadruple the size of your program if you didn't have to deal with who's got a chauffeur's license and who's got insurance and stuff like that. Right? Then we do a little bit of research as well. We actually have focus groups twice a year for the mentors and then for the mentees. So we have a graduate student who collects data by going around and running these focus groups. And I, as a faculty member, I'm not allowed in any of that. And we use that to kind of foster the future of the program. Right? Here's what a little brother said. We learn about respect in this program and what it means to be a man, like a strong man for your family, and to stop violence in our school. I couldn't have written anything better. So here's a little bit, I'll go very fast through this, what the program looks like. The first semester is very prescribed. So these are the first 12 sessions that we do. they have activities that are related to them. So we have to teach the mentors how to do these activities effectively, and then we get feedback about how they're working and how they're not working. And they're based in these three categories: respect, authenticity, and strength. Right? And that includes things like understanding bullying and bystander intervention, gender-based violence, confrontation. Now, gender-based violence, that sounds very formal. That's not what we actually talk to them about. We talk to them about girls. It's about as far as we can get down there. But it's amazing what people come in with. It's amazing if you think about it. If you think that a certain percentage of the kids come from homes that have a fair amount of domestic violence, then that's going to be a very ticklish subject for them. And sometimes just knowing that other people have that experience and can talk about it is really powerful for them. And the group is very helpful in that. Now then, in the individual sessions, the mentors have a choice. They can either pick up on a theme that was presented in the group or something that their particular mentee was talking about, or they can talk about more general things. And then they journal, and we find out a lot about what are the topics that these kids are bringing up, what are the things that they're concerned about, how do they manage that what they hear in group is different than how it actually is for them at home. Or when they talk to their dad or their stepdad or their foster dad, they may be getting a very different story. So it's not so much that they're getting a different story, but they have a place where they can talk about what are they supposed to do about it. Okay, my definition of adulthood is, the ability to do two things at the same time that are number one priorities. So usually when you get a good job, people start telling you you have to do everything all at once. And kids are like that too. They don't know how to choose. And college kids don't know how to choose either. We have a better shot at getting them to help talk to the kids about it. Then in the spring semester, then we have themes that we talk about, but we don't have formalized activities. So the groups still meet, and by then the groups have some cohesiveness, some ability to communicate, and they begin to generate what are the activities based on the theme. So we'll talk about the theme of leading in school and community, or honor and integrity in leadership, and we'll have a small kind of presentation by the mentors, and then a lot of participation by the mentees. And we have a big closing celebration, which we're going to be having in 3 weeks, where we bring all of the families together. We do a lot of other projects. We have like a photo project. We ask people to go take pictures of people who represent masculinity to them, or people who have had the biggest impact on their lives. And so then these 7th grade boys bring the pictures back. We have an art exhibition. We show them all. Each kid gets to get up and narrate a little bit about what he's done in his project. So I want to show you, this is the whole reason I did all of this talking, if I can get this to work, is I picked 7 of our mentors, and I asked them this question. Okay? In your mentor training, in the Men's Leadership Project, you learned a great deal about leadership, but also a great deal about child and adolescent development. Really a great deal about that. What did you learn about child development that has been the most useful to you as a mentor working with 7th grade boys? This is me. Oh boy. Rob, I think I might need some AV help here because this just stopped working. Rob, can you get the...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you get it.
Oh, I don't know.
developmental. Understanding the suite of development is really important. So the purpose of teaching a fair amount of developmental psychology to mentors who work with sixth grade boys, so they can have an understanding of the axes of our aim behavior.
That volume indicator on the left said 100.
Of the mentees, but of themselves as mentors, and understand behaviors as a mentor.
Right down there.
So the purpose of teaching a fair amount of developmental psychology to mentors who work with sixth grade boys, so they can have an understanding of the axes of a variety of behaviors that they're exhibiting, and to understand. So the purpose of teaching a fair amount of developmental psychology to mentors who work with sixth grade boys, so they can have an understanding of the axes of a variety of behaviors that they're exhibiting, and to understand also the developmental characteristics of each individual child. And as you'll hear some of the mentors speak, they'll talk a little bit about not only the developmental considerations of the mentor, of the mentees, but of themselves as mentors, and understanding the sweep of development as being important in understanding any particular behaviors as a mentor.
I think the thing that I've learned about child development that's been most useful in working with the seventh graders this year is the importance of positive relationships on their lives. And so learning about how relationships affect them and how a positive, stable relationship can influence their development as teenagers and into their later adolescence has been very useful in working with them this year. And I've seen the importance of relationships on them, whether it's academically, emotionally, or socially. And so I think that's been one of the things that's been most useful in working with them this year.
I learned that empathy and that caring for your peers and others may not come as easy to some boys and adolescents as it may for others. And what I learned as a leader is that I have to try a little bit harder to try and put their peers in perspective and make them realize their actions from another lens and how their words and their actions can impact others in a negative or in a positive light, because I think as they're growing, empathy is an important skill that they need to learn, but it isn't as intuitive as some adults may think it is.
Given the fact that all of us mentors are quite a few years away from our experience as seventh grade boys and as people in that position, it was really helpful to understand the fact that they are not fully, their brains just simply aren't fully developed. And that small basic fact would always help me come back from any frustration or any disappointment with my mentee, and I think for the other guys, their mentees too, that we are working with works in progress, and simply the ways that their brains function, the way that their brains are wired, are not, they're not right, and they're still developing, and that is part of the reason why we're there, and that is probably the most important thing, I think, for me to have remembered through any instance of working with my mentee.
A couple more.
So the thing that's been most helpful for me, I was working
See, that the minute the guy walks out.
into the program, but like one of the guys and like I remember reading this one chapter that mentioned how a lot of like adolescent boys one demonstrate like words of affection, like they'll do things for you and like just invite you into things, and that's like they're kind of coming around to you. And so I was more aware of that, and then a couple times that happened, and then I'd be like, after a couple weeks, they started like doing it to me, and other mentors like asking us to come join. And so that was like a really big confidence booster for me, and just having that like background knowledge like really helped my experience in the mentorship program.
You have to just stand there.
So I think they're still in the process of like cognitive reasoning.
Exchange student who's from Japan.
So knowing that
He had some of the most interesting insights.
you know, we have programs to cover, and in case you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, or like we ask why, like I don't know, really sort of like apathy is something really that makes me feel kind of sad, you know. But like knowing that, it's a kind of natural reaction for them because they're still like, you know, they don't really know, so they can't explain it. Knowing that, so they can be really sympathetic to them, I think, in a way, and also, just, you know, it helps people me to learn about understanding how their behavior more, you know.
All right, thank you for bearing with me on that. Sorry about that. No idea.
So you're all done with audio then?
I'm done with audio, yes.
Just you can press it.
That's okay?
Yeah.
Hey, Peter, can you just kind of summarize
Yeah.
what you heard from them? Because it was really hard to piece it all together.
Yeah, so the point that we're trying to make, we're near the end anyway for questions. So the point of this is, what part of the education that we tried to get for mentors actually sunk in? Was it something that they seemed to be using on a regular basis, or was it something that was not useful to them? So each of them in their own kind of static-y way, unfortunately, we're talking about which part, and I didn't prep them or have them divide up any of the activities, but they said, here's what I learned about empathy, or here's what I learned about developmental theory, or here's what I learned about how a child presents maybe a function of a lot of other things. So what that meant was that in the program, the training of the mentors became an extremely important part of the activity. And so one of the things that we did was we began to look at, were there any changes across the semester between discipline referrals in school and scores on masculinity measures that we had. And in fact, the results demonstrated that there were. I'll pull them up for you. All right, sorry. All right, so we did, this is the kind of research we did. We talked to the big brothers and little brothers in focus groups in the fall. We gave the big brothers and little brothers survey measures related to men and masculinity. And then we had a little brother academic and behavioral records. So we looked at what their academic achievement was like and what their records were like. So this is research that we just started doing. But this is the stuff that we began to see. There was positive emotional, social, and academic support, independent of the frequency of the interactions. Okay, that the big brothers indicated serving as a mentor deepened their sense of responsibility and accountability for others. Okay, very mild but directional results. First and second semester, looking at academic progress. often academic progress when you chart it through the year doesn't necessarily go up as the year goes, tends with behavior problems to go down. So at least we were bucking that trend. We'll continue to do that research, collecting later, and then behavioral progress. So this had to do with behavioral incident reports that happened at school. So as you can see here, that there was a reduction, a significant, these are the individual kids, number 1 was missing. But so you can see from this that the impact of the program, and we can't, obviously it's correlational, say what was going on, but we seem to be moving in the right direction. And then we gave a number of measures, the adolescent masculinity ideology in relationship scale and the male role attitude scale. So one for the little brothers and one for the big brothers, and we showed modest but positive changes in both of those. All right? So one of the little brothers said, it helped me to become a more respectful, kind man. It would be interesting to have a 7th grade boy describe himself as a respectful man. And now I know what I need to know for the future. So wish we could all say that. And a big brother said that I've learned I have to give a lot and expect to receive very little in return. Then you understand the role of love. Then you see the largest return. All right, so I'm going to stop there and see what questions you have. Thank you for your attention. Yeah.
I was just curious, what are a majority of the mentors' majors in college? Are they going towards like social work, early education, stuff like that, or?
So of the 7 that I showed you, I think there were 2 psychology majors, 2 majors in this youth and social innovation, one an engineer, business school person, and one person from economics. So there's a measure, yeah.
Is there any way you can see to apply this or any part of it in other contexts? There's such a need for this kind of thing with various disadvantaged youths and areas where there's a lot of youth violence and such. But this looks like it is so specialized, requires so many resources, that I'm a little discouraged in my own mind of thinking how it can be expanded.
Well, I think the hopeful part of this is that a lot of major academic institutions and universities are moving much more towards community-based involvement and research, right? And so this is an example where people can do academic things and be involved in the community. So I think our outreach as a university to the community is going to give us, document what those opportunities are, where they may not be so labor intensive. And part of the reason they're so labor intensive is because we made them up over on our side. We could ask people in the community what do they need, and they might say, not that much, if you're willing to do that, or we're be willing to co-sponsor or provide facilities or transportation or stuff like that. So I think we're trying to open up what has been a very closed relationship between universities and communities to say, there's evidence that this can help, not just the kids, but in the self-interest of the universities to say, like, you're going to have better graduates. I'm very proud of all these guys, and they're all, if I look at the last 4 or 5 years that I've known them really well, they've done stupendous things with their lives, and this has been an organizing principle for them. So I think for us to push out into the community more and more to answer the question that you have is, where else could we be more helpful?
When do you guys meet? It seems like in after school.
Yeah, so the groups are after school. So we get the referrals of the little brothers from the school counselors. So, and we're fortunate we've had the same school counselors in those schools now for 4 or 5 years. And so we recruit them from them, and then we use the school facility for the groups.
Okay. Well, the reason why I ask is because I work with another mentoring program here in Santa Fe, and we work within one class period during the day, which presents its own set of challenges and limitations. I was wondering.
Yeah, I think when you kind of get it wherever you can.
Yeah.
I worked in a lot of school systems, and some of them, school system is its own fiefdom, and some of the school systems are really great. Some, so I think that's great. If we could have done that, we'd have done it. Yes, in the back.
It's a logistic question connected to that. So they're all coming from the same school?
Well, this year we had two schools,
Okay.
two groups. We had kids in each group and mentors in each group. So the mentors met together in class as all the mentors together. Then they also had a planning time where they met in a group context and then with the kids. Yeah.
In your module about family, do you ever include women to come in to speak to your mentors?
I do. And we're now working more closely with the women's leadership program.
Yeah.
So that we can begin to look at what do we want to be coaching people towards from both sides of the aisle. So,
And what is the man box?
the man box is it's a YouTube video that describes what an African American man gets on and talks about how he was socialized into masculinity, which had to do with a gang rape that he was involved with living in New York City. And so what he learned, and there are a lot of people, some of you may know Terry Crews. Terry Crews is an actor. He was an NFL player and a bodybuilder and did Old Spice commercials. He's written a book, a really, I think, a lovely book, and has a couple of wonderful YouTube videos talking about what's men's responsibility in their relationships with women. So one of the things I do is I show a lot of different people. There's a woman who travels around the country talking to groups of men in their locker rooms about what does it mean to be a man. And so I try to spice it up with as much of that stuff as possible. And the man box is just one of those stories that's about how people learn about masculinity. Yeah, we'll come over here next.
Do you follow the 7th graders and see if their 8th grade behavior is any different?
We have not yet. Okay, they do in the women's leadership program, and that program has about 25 to 30 girls a year, and then 25 to 30 university women. Yes?
Talking about the man box, I'm curious how this program accommodates boys who might be exploring sexual orientation or gender fluidity.
It's a wonderful question. And I'll just give you my opinion about it and a little bit of experience because we are just starting down this road. There are two parts to that. One is how we want as a society to socialize people related to issues of gender identity. Number two is how you run a mentoring program where your mentors may in fact be dealing with issues of gender identity that are not either common or popular among your mentees. So for instance, we had a number of transgender people who were males and who wanted to be involved in the program, and they were wonderful in the class. But when they went to some of these inner city families and presented themselves as the mentor for their 7th grade boy, they were, it was a bridge too far. And the question is, we have a lot of infilling to do before we're really ready to do that. And then one of the things I faced as an instructor is what I think is best for my class and what I think is best for the littles, for the mentees. And I'm always trying to do what's best for the littles. I don't want to create a damaging circumstance, but at the same time, in the context of academic freedom, we needed another course to start to deal with those issues. But it's a good question. And then it's like, well, maybe we need people who are dealing with these issues paired with people who are dealing with kids who are dealing with these issues. How do we begin to identify them? And that's a big question down the road, and a really interesting one. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, how long are they getting together during each session?
So usually the session is about an hour, sometimes a little longer. And they usually divide it between sort of the structured activity and then running around. They usually play soccer or handball, something that they can do outside. Also depends on the weather, it depends on the season, depends on a lot of other things. We try to get at least a solid hour, not counting transportation time.
Right. And then the transportation is taking the kids home?
Yes, usually taking the kids home. Some of the kids get picked up, but most of them get taken home. It's in a neighborhood, so a lot of kids are walked home, and then other ways of getting the kids home. Yeah, let me go here and we'll come back here.
So a number of the people that you have on your contact list are female. It sounds like you're the one that teaches the class. How much interaction do the women in your program interact in this program? I mean, how much interaction do they have with the mentors or with
in my graduate program?
So I'm thinking about a potential project, but obviously I'm female.
Right.
And so thinking about, would it be absolutely necessary that it's only males who are
No, I don't think so.
the mentors are?
I don't think so. And that's anecdotal. I don't have a lot of research on that. But one of the founders of the program was a male. We just had, some of you may know, there's a psychologist, Chris Kilmartin, who's also a stand-up comedian. And he comes and he talks to the boys. One of the most popular things that happens is he comes and talks to them about it. So we bring a lot of men in, and we have women present too, because it's very important for them to hear. And in my class, there are a number of women who aren't mentors because they're just not interested in that project. And they're really amazing to have in class, because I asked them the same question. How did you learn about masculinity? What were your models for masculinity? And it's a pretty jaw-dropping experience for the guys in the class to hear about that. Okay, yes there, and then we'll come back here.
In the coursework, do you cover any trauma and its effect on brain development?
We're just starting to. Okay, I'm just starting to read that literature to put it in. We did a little bit last year. I don't think we did any of the year before. And that's the other challenge, is to get some cutting-edge research that is not too esoteric for them, because they, and that hopefully the quotes weren't too staticky. They did a really good job of kind of integrating what they had learned. Yes?
So I work for a public school district here in Mexico, and in our district we are unfortunately starting to see a rise in violent acts, and a lot in depression and suicide. We've had 6 suicides in a year, 2 of which were teachers. And so our community trauma is really high, in addition to we're a very impoverished town. And so we have a mentorship program where we're starting to see kids out of our juvenile detention center. So we have a military base. They've donated a squadron. They go and start meeting with them in jail, and then they follow them back and reintegrate them back into school. So, but as we know, early intervention is key. Our predominant violent attacks are starting in 8th grade. So do you guys provide steps or insight into more of a curriculum on how we would get this started? Because we also have a neighboring university, to where we could get more information from you on how to start.
The best thing I can say is call me, or I'll give you a card. I'm happy to talk about that, because universities and communities all have their own personalities too. So some are very open to those kinds of collaborations, and some are. Okay, one last question.
Okay, just kind of, I wrote down a couple of things, but when you were talking about in the community, when we have all these programs to look at and work towards the needs, I wonder how you could do that with the mentees, seeing what are their needs, and then maybe collaborate the mentees with the mentors and the families. That's why there's not that much disconnection when it comes to communication or just relationship and trust.
I think that's really a good idea, and they do it in the women's program because they have histories. They have larger groups of people, because there are always some outlying families, and when it doesn't work. And if you don't have enough people, you don't have a critical mass to do that. They have a larger mass, and they do that very much. We've had now 7 college women mentors who came through the program as kids, who started out in 7th grade, and and they've incorporated their families. And some families are very willing, and some are not very willing.
Then I think with the issue of sexual orientation and just stuff like that, I think what would be really beneficial for these types of topics that may not fit for everybody, or I think just giving resources out to these kids to go to a counselor, to go to this place for X, Y, and Z.
Well, we tried, yes, all really good. The one thing I can speak to, and a little bit to your point too, is sometimes we discover in our mentoring that there are kids who are really in trouble, or having issues, or there have been abuse or reported domestic violence. So we work them back through the school counselors to make sure that they're aware of all of that information. We leave that intervention to them, although we can follow to see, make sure that it's happening. Well, thank you all for your attention. I'll be staying up with them.
Could I get a card?
You could. Well, I can find it.